Hi everybody, I am Francisco Gil-White and I am here interviewing Ruchi Avital, who is one of the anchors here at Arutz Tov. Very nice to see you.
Nice to see you in person.
Ruchi. And there's a number of things I want to talk to you about. And I think I'll start with something we were mentioning before the show began, which is your interest in the Jewish community in India that is now living in Israel. I don't know how big this community is. Can you tell us?
I don't know how many exactly they are now in Israel, but they came to Israel. They were a very small Jewish community in India, a very small community. India, of course, is a huge country with a huge population, today the largest in the world. But I think at their height, they were about 50,000, which is really not even a teaspoon in an ocean of the population of India. Yeah. And they historically claim that they are there since the first temple.
I see.
Since the time of King Solomon. That's what we were told. There is one representative of the community and his wife, that is two members of the community who have remained behind. This gentleman remained behind to curate the synagogue that remained. There are 5 remaining synagogues there, but this one is the only active synagogue. It has a Torah scroll. And we actually, we were a group of couples from the Benjamin area of Israel. Mm-hmm. And we were 28 people, and we actually prayed in the synagogue the afternoon prayer, and we opened up the Torah scroll and read from it.
This is on your recent trip?
This is on my recent trip in India. I spent 2 weeks in India, just in the south, and it was very, very moving. This community of Jews, although they had never suffered from any persecution whatsoever during the almost 2,000 years or more than 2,000 years that they lived in India. India is a famously pluralistic society, especially the Hindi community, very, very pluralistic, and they never suffered from any persecution. And despite that, they, number one, did not assimilate, except for individuals here and there. And number two, as soon as the State of Israel was formed in 1948, they picked up their things and left. And the people of Cochin begged them to stay because they loved them.
I see.
And they said, we have to go. It's our duty. It's our religious duty. And they came to Israel.
And so they all moved, the entire community?
The entire community, and they are in different moshavim around Israel in Nevatim. They brought their Torah scrolls, and some of them have the actual ark from their synagogue. In Nevatim, in Ofer, and in a few other moshavim in Israel, mainly are where they are concentrated.
So these people are mostly farmers in Israel?
Yes.
Were they mostly farmers in India?
Not necessarily.
I
no.
see.
They lived in Cochin and the surrounding area, which is a city. I don't know. They probably did engage in some kind of agriculture as well, because the society isn't exactly built like here.
But they are together here as a community.
They mostly live together as a community. I actually have a niece who is married to a son of people who came from Cochin. So I had a personal interest in.
And I suppose they look like other Indians.
They look just like Indians. My niece's mother-in-law still wears a sari.
I see.
And
wow, how interesting!
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting.
Okay, so let's. Is it okay if we move on to the main topic?
Of course.
The main course.
Of course.
So I understand that you have a lot of experience participating in the movements of what they call the Israeli right, which I prefer to call the patriot movements. I think that's a better label, because the right has negative connotations for many people in the West, and I've seen it. Unfortunately, they map those negative connotations onto what they call the Israeli right, simply because that label is used.
Right.
And I actually think that this is not very helpful. I think I don't think everybody on the right is a good patriot, but I think people like you certainly are called. They call you the right,
the hard right,
and there is certainly one part of the right that I would say is definitely patriotic and working very hard.
Well, actually, in Israel here we call ourselves the national camp, not the rightist camp, but the national camp.
I see.
Not ultra-nationalist, but
Okay.
national.
Right, right. So national patriotic, that's it's in the same semantic space.
Same
so that's
family,
good.
right, exactly.
Okay, so because you are a veteran of these movements, I'm interested in asking you about the disengagement, because I know that I heard that the disengagement was very important to you. It had a big impact on you. So please first tell us very briefly what the Gaza disengagement was and why it was so important to you.
Okay, so I have to step back a little bit first. I don't want to take credit for something that isn't mine. I actually lived for many years in a kibbutz. My husband was born in a kibbutz Yavne, a religious kibbutz. And so, you know, when we later moved to Ofra, which is a community just north of Jerusalem, across what was known as the Green Line. Many considered the first. There's kind of a competition whether it was Kedumim or Ofra. Being from Ofra, of course, I'll say Ofra was the first community created. In fact, Ofra is celebrating its 50th anniversary right now. And I served for many years after we moved to Ofra. I served as a spokesperson for Ofra in English and to the foreign press. And so a couple of things. I used to introduce myself when they would ask me. I would say I lived in a kibbutz, which is of course socialist and leftist. So I would say, you know, I don't know. Am I leftist? Am I rightist? I don't know. I don't think those labels apply here. So that's to your previous point.
At that time, did you yourself have a socialist identity?
Well,
or a leftist identity?
No. We left the kibbutz because we didn't agree with the ideology of the kibbutz. But I like to make that point because I wanted to point out to the especially European, where right wing was associated with fascist Nazi ideology. Right. Of course, we both know that Nazism was not a right-wing ideology, it was a left-wing ideology, but we won't go there right now.
Well, I mean, I think I understand your point, because they called themselves National Socialists.
Exactly.
That's what Nazi
But
means.
I don't think the labels today apply, certainly in Israel, to those categories in Europe, where they're mostly, you know, they're different. Anyway, I don't want to get into that right now. So that was number one. And number two, when I used to get groups, and I had every possible group journalists from every possible outlet, and groups also like J Street from America, and, you know, they would come from Ramallah, where they'd met with Yasser Arafat, and then come to Ruchi Avital in Ofra. And I would always start by saying the state of Israel was 19 years old when these communities were started to be established. So in other words, I wanted to put it into historical context. That look, now it's 50 years since Ofra has existed, and the state of Israel was only 19 years old in the Six-Day War. So that kind of, it's like it was another day of the War of Independence. Just another step. So that's how I see it. These are our ancestral lands. To say that Judea and Samaria, the heartland of the land of Israel, shouldn't belong to Israel is just, it doesn't make sense. And what we always said and always say is that if we don't have a right to be in Hebron and in Ofra and in Bet El, where Jacob lay his head down, then what right do we have to claim Tel Aviv? Right. So if you don't believe that we have a right to these places, based on what exactly are you claiming your right to be in Tel Aviv? So, you know, that's a problem.
I think that's a perfectly sound argument. I use a different tactic when I'm speaking to people who may have different kinds of prejudices about the Jewish people and about Israel. What I do is I say, look, even if you don't establish your basis of argumentation on the history of the Jewish people and their title to the land in the Bible, even if you don't do that, you could just ask the question, in terms of modern international law, who does this land belong to? And if you ask that question, what you find is that in 1947, the UN offered two states, not one, but two states. One state to the Jewish Palestinians and one state to the Arab Palestinians. They were all residents of British Mandate Palestine, right? And the Jewish Palestinians said, we'll take the offer. And the Arabs said, we reject the offer, we choose war, and we want to exterminate the Israeli Jews. Okay, well, that's not moral, it's not legitimate, it's a violation of international law. So it would be absurd to say that the land belongs to the people who said they didn't want it and who chose to try to commit genocide against their neighbors. And since they didn't want it, and then the Arabs later used those territories, which were offered in 1947, at least the part that they controlled after 49, they used those territories to try again to wipe the Jewish people, right? So those territories were of a completely undetermined status. They didn't belong to anyone. They were used by these outside powers to try to destroy the Jewish people. In that defensive war, Israel ended up controlling those territories, which didn't belong to anyone, right? So who do they belong to? But the only logical and rightful claim belongs to Israel because of the circumstances.
For some reason, all the logical and rightful claims that apply everywhere else in the world don't apply in Israel.
It's a mystery. Why do you think that happens?
It's a mystery. It's a mystery. So going back to your question, so we joined Ofra. We moved to Ofra in 1987.
Yeah.
Just on the eve of the first Intifada.
Yeah.
We came in the summer, and it started in December, I believe.
Right.
And at that time, it was mostly rocks being thrown. There wasn't that much shooting. They didn't have weapons at that time. It was much more primitive.
Remind me of the year?
87.
87.
87, okay. Late 87. Mm-hmm. And there were very few fatalities.
So 87, just so that everybody's on the same page, is the year of the first Intifada. Right? That's why you were referring to the rock throwing and so forth.
Yes. And so, the famous iconic pictures were of a child throwing a rock at a tank and so on and so forth to show, how weak and how they are the oppressed and we are the oppressors.
Well, but also because the left around the world has been taught since the late 60s, 70s, they've been taught this is what Marxist professors did in Western universities all over. They taught their students that if you're the little guy, you're always right. So if they can convince you that one side is smaller, weaker, has less territory, fewer weapons, whatever the dimension of smaller, weaker, then automatically they're right no matter what they do.
Exactly.
And the other side, the bigger side, the one that has more land, perhaps more weapons, whatever, they're always wrong. You don't have to interpret their behavior. You don't have to look at evidence. The minute you label them as small and big, automatically you're supposed to know who has justice on their side, and you're not supposed to think at all about what they're doing.
That's what Professor Gad Saad famously calls suicidal empathy. Right? This is what's happening all over the world. In Europe especially, we're seeing with the admission of millions of Muslim immigrants who do not share the cultural ethics and values of the host countries and are destroying it from within.
Yes.
And this was just getting a foothold then in the 70s and 80s. Right. And this was very typical of the Israeli left as well. The Israeli left created a new religion.
A secular religion.
Jews, there's no such thing as a Jew who's not religious. It's not always Judaism. If it's not Judaism, then they have to pick another religion. There's something inherently religious about the Jewish soul, as a generalization, of course. And that's why we see in history, for example, in the communist movement in Russia and the Bolshevik movement, we see an inordinate and disproportionate amount of Jews among the leaders of the Communist Party, Trotsky, and so on and all.
Because they were substituting one religion with another religion.
Exactly, and fanatically so.
Right.
And the religion of the leftist Jew in Israel became peace. Peace became the most important value beyond everything else, beyond life, actually. Whereas in Jewish religion and in Judeo-Christian society, I would say this also to groups and journalists. If I were to ask you, what is the most important value? Any of you, from Europe, from America, whatever, I think 100% of you would say a human life. But if a person can kill their sister or mother over family honor, then obviously honor is a more important value than human life.
Right.
Even of your own family.
Right.
So I think, just to make sure that we're on the same cultural page, we are not all on the same cultural page.
Perhaps to say that the most important value for the left became peace, maybe that's a distortion too, because to me it feels more accurate to say that capitulation became their main value, not peace, because the things they do don't promote peace at all. What they do is they strengthen the position of the enemies of the Jewish state, enemies who in fact say out loud that they want to commit genocide against the Israeli Jewish population. So it seems to me that the central value is not really peace. Peace is sort of the marketing excuse for the things they do, the sort of the veneer. But what the real value is pleasing the anti-Semites, or pleasing the people who have a grievance against Israel. Whatever they demand, we'll give it to them, because the only objective is to appease them. So maybe that's the word. The real value is not peace, but appeasement.
That's a very interesting way of looking at it. I'm not sure it makes a big difference, because I think it's basically the same idea. Mm-hmm. Because the whole peace movement was based on Israel giving up land for peace.
Right.
And you couldn't convince them with the facts. You could not confuse them with the facts.
Right.
No matter what happened, and even now, no matter what happens. I mean, you see it now. October 7th was a huge wake-up call. Mm. There were people who didn't need that wake-up call.
Right.
The people on the patriotic national right camp didn't need that wake-up call. We've been saying it for many years.
Yes.
Everybody on our side, to go back to the disengagement, we were talking about the disengagement.
So how did that affect you?
So at that time, it was really to see Israeli society, a very ugly side of Israeli society. It's really, really a tragic irony. I use the word irony really cautiously, that October 7th came and attacked those very kibbutzim in the south of Israel that rejoiced at the disengagement.
Right.
When they were the first to suffer. They were the first to bear the consequences of that. But
so in other words, just so that everybody understands, because some people who are not very familiar with Israel will end up hearing this, the people who established kibbutzim right next to the Gaza border,
known as the Gaza periphery or envelope.
Exactly.
Sometimes
those agricultural communities. The members of those agricultural communities were people on the left, mostly.
Very much so.
Right, who had a very strong ideology about finding some kind of peaceful arrangement with the people that live in Gaza, with the Arabs of Gaza and so forth. And therefore, when in 2005, Ariel Sharon decided that Israel would evacuate itself from Gaza and that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, would forcibly remove the Jews who lived there, because the Arabs don't tolerate Jews in the land that they are allowed to govern, right? This is a very important point.
Very important point.
So all of that movement was strongly supported by the people who lived in the agricultural communities right around Gaza. They were strong leftists who believed the Gaza disengagement, which was an experiment, right? We're going to try out Arab self-government in Gaza, right? I guess the idea that was sold to the Israelis was we're going to show the world that we mean business when we talk peace. So we're going to show that we ask for nothing. We will give them the territory of Gaza.
And they swore that if one single object, at least to say a missile, flew in from those territories, they would immediately respond, of course, a promise that was never kept.
Never kept. So the people who most believe in that experiment, established agricultural communities right around Gaza. They even had programs to meet Arabs from Gaza. They were employing many Arabs from Gaza in their own agricultural communities, etc. Those were the people that the Gaza terrorists killed, right? Those are the people that the Hamas terrorists came out and killed.
Not just killed, tortured.
Tortured to death.
Raped, burned to death, parents in front of children, children in front of parents, in the most horrific ways possible.
So that was a wake-up call for a lot of people, precisely because the people most interested in establishing good relations with the Arabs of Gaza were the first to get tortured to death, right? That became a wake-up call, it seems to me, for a lot of people on the left.
For a lot of people on the left.
But before that, when the disengagement happened, these people didn't wake up. They didn't listen to the right.
No, they were cheering on. This was a moment, not a moment, but it was a time of a huge lack of empathy in Israel for the people. What's the big deal? You have to move. You'll move. A lot of people move. That's all it was to them, to move, without understanding that a person, especially in agricultural communities, but anywhere, you have roots in the land itself. This is the land of Israel.
But what was your position when the disengagement happened?
I was vehemently against it, and I participated in a lot of the demonstrations against it.
Okay.
But
who was leading that movement? The movement to stop the Gaza disengagement?
It was led by the entire national camp. I would say there's an organization called the Yesha Council. Yesha is an acronym for Yehuda, Shomron, Va'aza, Judah, Samaria, and Gaza.
Right.
So it's no longer now, there are a lot of jokes going around. Now it's called Moetzet Yesh, or Moetzet Yeshu, which is the Hebrew name for Jesus.
I see.
So he said, why Yeshu? Because it's Moetzet Yehuda, Shomron, Ve.
Right.
And there's nothing after the Ve, which is and. So it became Yesh. Anyway, that was. So yeah, there's a lot of macabre humor, of course, that always accompanies everything we do. So the Yesha Council were
very involved
in that.
Who else?
All the parties on the right, some of which are in the Knesset now as well, and under different names, some of them.
If you had to name one individual or two individuals who were especially important?
Wow. I have to go back. I'd say mostly the leaders of in Yesha, and I can't think of specific names right now, and I don't think that's particularly important. I mean, it was really a grassroots movement of many, many people. There was a huge demonstration in Kfar Maimon, which is very nearby the border today, of thousands and thousands of people, and the police didn't let them. They just encircled the entire community and didn't let them out. And buses were stopped on the way. It was very, very undemocratic. The same people who talk about guarding democracy from the government, which is, of course, the representative of the people, the sovereign. They were and talk about freedom of speech, and they're the ones on Kaplan Street in Tel Aviv demonstrating. They were demonstrating every week, very, very extremely loudly, and everywhere else in Israel. Buses were stopped. People were not allowed. So the same
people who are insisting on their right to expression now were not allowing your camp to express itself back then.
Not only that, thousands of people were arrested, thousands, including teenagers, young girls, 14-year-old girls were kept in prison 7 to 10 days because they refused to give their names. We're talking about young children. Aaron Barak himself asked that the cases be brought, anything that came to the Supreme Court come to his docket specifically. And the law was used as a tool, as a cudgel against the right, as it is today as well.
Okay, and the thing that we should never lose from sight is that these people who were being oppressed by Israeli authorities, that the IDF was used against, right? These were Israeli Jews, Israeli citizens who turned out to be right, because the argument of these demonstrators, including yourself, was that if Israel evacuated Gaza, Gaza would become a giant problem for the state of Israel. The argument on the other side was, well, look, it's very expensive to police Gaza. We're losing a few soldiers all the time in Gaza. It's just very complicated. It's not worth it. What are we doing there? Why don't we get out? Just let them have Gaza.
It's actually the same argument that was used in Lebanon when Israel had a periphery along the border. And
it's too expensive. Let's get out.
Soldiers were killed occasionally there, and it's not worth it, and so on and so forth.
Right.
But it all catches up with you.
But the argument on your side was, yes, of course there's a cost to holding Gaza, but the cost of evacuating Gaza is going to be infinitely larger. And October 7th, not only October 7th, because there have been missiles raining down on Israeli civilians.
Campaigns when what we call rounds of fighting where Israeli soldiers were killed.
So it's not just October 7th, but October 7th was the most dramatic demonstration that you guys were right. That nothing could be more costly than not controlling Gaza.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely. I think it's, well, there's another point that I want to make before answering that, and that is that there was a person, he's no longer with us, Uri Elitzur. He was a writer and a commentator, and he was the editor of Makor Rishon newspaper. Yeah. And he was a neighbor of mine in Ofra, and he wrote wonderful articles. And in one article, I remember he said that we are not arguing to keep Judea and Samaria for security reasons. Because if I tell you that's not the reason why, Judea and Samaria belong to us.
Well, of course, but that doesn't mean that you don't need it for security reasons.
But I want to put it in the first place.
Okay.
Right? In the first place, Judea and Samaria belong to us, because if you have two coats and I have no coat, and I steal one of your coats to keep myself warm in the winter, yes, I've kept myself warm in the winter, but ultimately I stole your coat.
Right.
Right? I may have had a good reason or whatever, but it's your coat.
Right.
But here it's not your coat, it's our coat. So Judea and Samaria belong to us. So that's reason number one. And that's the most important thing. It's not just for security reasons.
Right.
And Gaza is also part of the land of Israel.
Yes.
So it's not just for security reasons.
Right.
But yes, absolutely what you said. This was supposed to be an experiment, right? In fact, it began with Jericho and Gaza first. That's what they called it. We're just going to try it out. And then if it works out, then we'll be able to withdraw from all of Judea and Samaria.
That was the whole idea.
That was the whole idea.
Yeah, we will demonstrate that peace can work.
But as somebody once said, I don't know why he hates me. I never helped him. I was never right. You know, people hate you when you're right, especially if you're on the right. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that we were right. But, you know, I think we have to differentiate. I think we have to differentiate.
Because I think a lot of people did wake up.
Exactly, that's what I wanted to say. A lot of people are waking up. The media has not woken up. The people, the voices
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that, because you're in the media.
A little bit.
You're in a tiny little corner of the Israeli media that has a voice that is consistently defending Israeli Jews. But what I see, and what a lot of other people see, who are defenders of Israel, we see something that looks like a madhouse. So we see the overwhelming majority of the media in Israel, certainly all the very big media in Israel, behaving as though they are getting paid by the enemies of Israel.
You couldn't put it better. It's like as if they are Hamas spokespeople.
Exactly.
Right. Just yesterday when Israel started bombing Gaza again, and went back to fighting in Gaza, Barak Ravid, who's an Israeli journalist in America, I think for Axios or something like that, he said that Israel broke the agreement. That Israel broke the agreement. That the Hamas was willing to give back hostages, but we broke the agreement. I mean, don't you remember? First of all, it's not true. First of all,
no, of course it's not true.
It's absolutely not true. But even if it were true, why would it be such a terrible crime to break an agreement?
I agree completely with
a savage terrorist group?
Well, the first question we should ask is, why would you ever sign an agreement with a terrorist force that already attacked you? Israel is the defending state, right? They already attacked you. They tortured to death more than 1,000 civilians. They took 251 hostages, right? but they deserve absolutely no consideration.
And this is after we already experienced the results of this type of capitulation with Gilad Shalit.
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, October 7th is a consequence of
a direct consequence of. Let's explain to the viewers. Yes, because in what year was it? 2000.
I think it's 12 years ago, something like that.
Something like that. A soldier, an Israeli soldier named Gilad Shalit, was abducted on the Gaza-Israel border.
Right.
And after a long campaign in the media, it's not that everybody didn't care about Gilad Shalit. Of course we cared about Gilad Shalit, but there was a huge, highly expensive, first of all, it was paid for, and extremely emotional, purely emotional, I should say, campaign on television constantly. And at that time, there were no television stations that didn't lean left. All Israeli, the mainstream media in Israel at that time, from the Tagid, which is the official broadcaster of Israel, which leans left, to those that are lying down left, they don't lean, they've already fallen over all completely on their side, like 90-something% of their anchors and news people are very strong left. We're campaigning very, very strongly for it. And eventually, Netanyahu, who was the prime minister at the time, he caved in, not to his credit. And I'm not judging him. I'm not in his position. I see now that he's learned a lesson from that. I think he's not caving in as much now.
Where do you see that?
Let's not go there right now. But this terrible campaign, this constant campaign. Gilad is everybody's son. He's our son. Everywhere you went over Israel, just like you see the hostage signs now, you were seeing Gilad Shalit everywhere. Eventually he gave in and gave 1,023 hostages in return for one soldier.
You know what? I call that a human shields policy, because the true exchange is not 1,023 terrorists for one Israeli soldier. That's not the real exchange. The real exchange is 1,200 murdered Israeli civilians plus 250 new hostages.
And
that's the real exchange. Forgive me?
And all the others that were killed in the middle.
Of course. But
no, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And we've done it again. We've given terrorists with a lot of blood on their hands in return for the hostages kept in Gaza.
So I have a question for you, because I always hear that the anti-Israel movements in the West and the media keep calling Israel an apartheid state, right? And to me, an apartheid state means that because the apartheid comes from the original situation in South Africa, where you had a tiny minority that was preventing the majority from having any rights, right? But what I see is here that the majority, which is the Israeli Jews, has fewer rights than the Arab minority. I'll tell you why. In Israel, if a Jew kills another Jew, the murderer is going to stay in prison. Or kills an Arab, will stay in prison. But if an Arab kills a Jew, all they have to do is wait for the Arabs to commit another crime, which is to take some hostages, and then there will be a negotiation and the Arab murderers come out of prison. So that means that Israel is an apartheid state, but it's an apartheid state against the Israeli Jews.
Against Israeli Jews.
We also see, I've seen signs, because I've driven all over Judea and Samaria, Yehuda and Shomron.
The red signs.
I've seen the red and yellow signs that say no Israeli citizen is allowed beyond this point. They put those signs
for fear of death.
For fear of death. It says the Israeli state will not protect you if you go beyond this point. And they put these signs at the entrance of Arab villages. So if Israeli citizens don't have freedom of movement in their own country, it's an apartheid state against them.
Against them. No, I couldn't put it better myself. You're absolutely right. There's a really perverse morality involved here. We see it also in Western countries where certain minorities, let's say in Scandinavia, we know that the Muslim minorities commit most of the crime, the especially violent crime in Scandinavia, especially rape, right?
Sure. Well, we had the scandal of the rape gangs in Britain.
England. Right,
just
exactly.
recently.
And you're not allowed to say who they are because you're this made-up term called Islamophobic.
Exactly.
Right.
If you mention that the rape gangs were Muslim, then suddenly you're phobic.
We get the same thing here. Also, that sometimes there's certain like code words that if you know how to read them, then you know it means Arab. So they'll say tsi'irim, young people, young men, and they won't say what ethnic group they belong to, but
Right.
we understand. But if, for example, they're Jewish or, God forbid, Haredi, ultra-Orthodox, then that will appear in the newspaper.
Of course.
Right.
Of course.
So we see this kind of reverse apartheid here. You're absolutely right. We discriminate against ourselves all the time.
Now, it seems to me, I've made this observation in other spaces. It seems to me that if you are simply observing, you have no particular stake or dog in the fight, you're just observing the behavior of the people running the most important institutions in Israel, including the government. It seems to me that a reasonable hypothesis would be they're getting paid by the enemies of Israel. And I've said this in several spaces. The behavior is consistent with that hypothesis. Could be right, could be wrong, but the behavior is certainly not inconsistent with that hypothesis. And just recently, in the last few weeks, we've been hearing that Qatar, according to some accusations that have been aired in Israel, that Qatar had been paying some people in the Israeli government to do work for Qatar, like improving Qatar's image and who knows what else.
I don't know about that. It might be, one or two individuals that it was going through a middleman or whatever. But I actually read, I thought you were going there, that the protest movement for the hostages is also being funded in some part by Qatar. So, but again,
well, let's
once
explain
said,
the logic of that. Let's explain the logic, because somebody might think, well, if Qatar is funding the movement for the hostages, they must be worried about the hostages. So let's explain why that is an anti-Israel move.
Because the protest movement in favor of the hostages, and I don't want to say the hostages, in favor of some of the hostages, because there are many among the families of the hostages who realized at a very early point that this movement, that they did not agree with the
Well, that's a very important point, because people get the impression that the movement to conduct any kind of negotiations to free the hostages, to pay any price to free the hostages, people think that movement is led by the families of the hostages. But the truth is that although it is true that some family members of the hostages are involved in that movement, there are also other family members of other hostages, or maybe of the same hostages, that don't agree with that and that have taken an opposite position.
Absolutely. Right? At a very early point, there were a group of parents and siblings of hostages who started a movement called the Hope Movement, Tikva, and they were vehemently opposed to the tactics used by the movement in favor of doing anything, what they said, hakol, anything, everything, in order to free the hostages. I never understood exactly what that means. What do you mean, everything? Are you willing for me to get killed? Are you willing for your other children to get killed? Right. Are you willing for the state to be destroyed?
What's the meaning of everything?
What does it mean, everything? I mean, that's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous thing to say. And secondly, in the Middle Eastern bazaar, or any bazaar in the world, you never tell your negotiating partner
what you're willing to do,
pay.
Obviously.
Right. You never tell them what your bottom line is.
Right,
you
exactly.
You keep walking away until they come up with a price that you can live with, right? So this is a very stupid negotiating tactic.
So now with
I
this,
have to say that fewer and fewer of the parents and the families of the hostages remained with this highly funded, I don't know, some people are throwing out numbers like billions that were invested in this movement. I mean, it's unimaginable how much every Saturday night for over a year and a half, signs all over the country in the most strategic locations and so on and so forth. A lot of money was involved there, television advertising, of course, and so on.
Right.
A lot of the families just disengaged from the movement and just kept a very low profile in the correct understanding that the lower their profile, the better chances they have of their child getting out. And I feel very sorry. There's this one woman, I don't want to mention her name, it doesn't matter, but she's just absolutely, her actions are, the language that she uses and everything. And I feel sorry for her because, you know, if I were Hamas, that would be the last person that I would release because she's going to keep working for me until the end.
Right.
I just
so it seems to me that
I think even her own husband said that.
So with this explanation that you're giving us, I think it becomes clear why Qatar would have an interest in funding this
whether
movement.
It's true and whether the people there know that they are being funded by Qatar, I don't know. I don't know if it's true that they're being funded. I wouldn't put it past them.
Right,
obviously.
but there is a logic to the claim,
Absolutely,
right?
there's definitely a logic to it.
Because the entire strategy of Hamas with the taking of hostages, the entire strategy is to engage Israel in negotiations. That's what they do that for, right? So Qatar being the patron of Hamas, right? I mean, in reality, Israel was attacked by Qatar, right? So it would make sense for Qatar to support on the other side, on the Israeli side, a movement that is supporting the Hamas strategy, which is negotiations for hostages, right? Because that's how they get what they want.
Absolutely. I have to say that from the first day, literally, when I saw the campaign and the slogan, which was "Bring them home," I said, "Who are they talking to? Who is supposed to bring them home? If you are talking to Hamas, so you're not going to say bring them home, you're going to say let them go." Right? Let my people go. That's kind of like a well-known slogan, right? We're moving up to Passover now, so let my people go. So that would be the most obvious slogan to use, but it was bring them home. What is bring them home? In other words, you're telling the Israeli government, bring them home.
Well, let's go to Passover for a second. So, because what's the lesson of Passover? The lesson of Passover is you have to scare the Pharaoh. You can't plead with the Pharaoh. Right? You can't offer your own people as a sacrifice in order to get Pharaoh to agree.
Well, it's basically what Trump has said. You get peace through strength,
right?
Not through weakness.
Okay, but now let's go to Trump, because I want to leave you with a controversial idea.
Well, I just want to go back to one thing. When I see those signs, bring them home, I would love to be able to fund another campaign where all I have to do is put one word before the slogan, God, bring them home. Just change it. God, bring them home.
Good.
Not BB bring them home, because basically what they're saying is BB bring them home. You're responsible.
You do it.
It's your fault. You have to do it. You have to bring them home. When that's not who it should. If you want to pray to God to bring them home, pray to God to bring them home.
So Moshe Feiglin has said that in his view, what the government should be doing is cut off, and it should have done this from the beginning, cut off all the water, electricity, everything going into Gaza, and tell Hamas, we will restore the flow of all of these things the minute the hostages are released. But until you do, nothing's coming into Gaza. What do you think of that idea?
Well, of course, that was the obvious idea right at the beginning. In fact, right at the beginning, Minister Israel Katz, who is now the defense minister, but at the time was the minister of infrastructures, I believe, he said he's going to cut off all the water to Gaza. But obviously, the Americans didn't let us do it.
Interesting. So now let's go to the Americans, because I want to leave you.
And Israel, at that time, because of 20 years of generals in the army that had weakened the IDF and said, we don't need a big army anymore. It was famously Ehud Barak who said, we just need a small, smart army. And a lot of these generals came from, who were chiefs of staff and members of the general staff, were members of special units, of commando units. Commando units are very, very different from, let's say, armored units. The current chief of staff came from the armored forces. So it's a different way. You look at the whole army. Okay, and they were looking at, we don't need this big army anymore. It's too expensive and we can manage. There are not going to be any more ground wars, they said. That's it, we're done. And so they made the army smaller and we became dependent. Instead of manufacturing our own munitions. We became dependent completely on the Americans for our munitions, which is a situation which is changing now.
I hope so.
Yeah, so do I. And not only that, but the Americans had warehouses full of weapons for our use that were diverted to Ukraine. So the warehouses here were empty. So, you know, I can sit back like Moshe Feiglin, with whom in principle I agree, of course, and a lot of people agree. I don't know if it would have been feasible at that time to do that and leave ourselves without the ability to fight the war that needed to be fought. I don't know. Okay?
Well, but wait, I hear a contradiction in what you're saying, because if you simply cut off everything, you don't have to fight a war. That nothing comes in. They can't drink. How long are they going to last without water?
No, I don't think they would care if their people would starve to death.
But why should you care? In other words,
no, that's not the issue. But I think the people in the tunnels would have lasted a very long time. They had a lot of fuel. They had a lot of water. They had what they needed down there.
Well, if the people in the tunnels last a long time, but the population doesn't, the population will take matters into their own hands.
It's possible, but
that's a policy.
I don't give them the credit for that, because
why shouldn't you try it? Is my point.
No, I agree. But again, not having been in the position of making the decision, I don't know all the factors. So yes, it would have been. Sounds like it would have been the right thing to do at that time. It sounds like the obvious thing to do at that time. I agree. But I don't give the Gazan people credit, or the Palestinians, so-called Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, the credit to rise up against Hamas, even at the cost of their lives. Because they support them.
Okay. I don't know what the actual facts are, but I suspect that if you cut the water, they are not going to last for months and months. Well, I mean, you just need to have water, and
yeah, but I don't know how that would have played out internationally.
But who cares? This is very important. Who cares? We have seen that the accusations against Israel are always the same, regardless of what the behavior is. So why not win? In other words, you evacuated Gaza. You allowed the Arabs in Gaza to self-govern. The entire idea was to showcase to the world that whose opinion you think is important, to showcase that you're interested in peace, right? So you're going to allow the Arabs of Gaza self-government. The consequence of that was that Gaza was turned into a terrorist nightmare that attacked Israeli civilians, not only on October 7th, it's been doing it for years. And the consequence was still that international opinion attacked Israel for what happened on October 7th. So if you're going to get criticized anyway, why not win? Why not win?
Why not win? That makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah.
Okay, and I want to
We're all conditioned to some extent to, caring more than we should about international opinion, which we're not going to change anyway.
Okay, and I want to leave you now with my controversial idea. Because we agree that Qatar attacked Israel on October 7th. Hamas is not...
By proxy.
By proxy, exactly. And I think an interesting question that we have to consider is whether the United States attacked Israel on October 7th. Because Qatar happens to be the most important U.S. military base in all of the Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia. That's where the CENTCOM headquarters are. And Qatar is impossible to defend. It's a tiny peninsula of sand, right, with the largest gas reserves in the world. So it's a great prize for any imperial power that wants to gobble it up, right? So it's attractive to any power that wants to conquer it, and impossible to defend unless it has an American base there. So it seems to me that the United States can easily control Qatari foreign policy. If Qatar is pursuing a foreign policy that the U.S. bosses don't like, they could easily have it changed. And what is Qatari foreign policy? It is the promotion and the financing of international jihadism against Israel, and in particular, financing Hamas, who attacked you on October 7th. If this was not U.S. policy, it seems to me it would have changed a long time ago.
I don't know how to answer that question.
But at least think about it.
I have to say it's crossed my mind.
Okay.
I have to say it's crossed my mind. And I think we dodged a huge bullet, a cannonball actually, when Trump won. I know that you're not crazy about Trump either.
I'm not.
I know. But for the time being, he seems to be doing all the right things for the United States, first of all, which is good for the world. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Well, I'm preparing an article on Trump in the Middle East. Well, I'll be very happy to get your comments and think further about this question, because I think it's a very important one. Ruchi, thank you so much for joining us. This was a very interesting interview. I hope to do this again soon. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us. This is a joint program between Management of Reality and Arutz Tov. And those of you who would like to visit us in Management of Reality can do it at managementofreality.com or franciscogilwhite.com. They will both take you to the same place. We have a lot of material, not only defending Israel and the Jewish people, but also explaining the large contours of the geopolitical system and also many specific corners of it, so that you can understand better what's going on. Thank you very much, Ruchi.
Thank you.
Goodbye.